Are you ready? Okay. Welcome to the December meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Commission. I'd like to start by asking for approval of the November minutes.
I approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Just want to give a update on wastewater and storm water drainage in the village and in the lake. I think as most people know, there's been a considerable amount of activity going on. The Lake Agawam Conservancy has been resurrected and is very active. The village has formed a Clean Water Committee, I believe it's called. Hopefully I have it right. Which is now beginning to coordinate efforts.
Who's on that committee?
Rob Coburn and
Right, Rob Coburn, Tom Lolotham, and I'm missing someone. I'll find out. I'll tell you. So there's a few people on it. They've begun to just do sort of what Jesse had been doing with us about a year and a half ago, if you remember, where he was consolidating all the information that was out there. They've done that, and they're beginning to put that together into a plan. And we're going to be working with them as they move forward. The trustees are hiring Pio Lombardo, who came here several years ago to do a study of the use of IA systems as a more immediate ability to solve some individual buildings that want to upgrade, or clusters of the buildings that want to upgrade. Pio's going to come next month to talk about his work.
Can I just interrupt?
Yeah, of course.
January
Right.
is,
We're going to figure out a new date for the meeting.
well, no,
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I just am wondering if, he's going to come talk to us,
Right.
right? Okay. So I was just wondering if a later date would be better attended.
I think this will be more than once.
Okay.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But this will be more than once. He wants to come first to sort of give us some sense of what he's doing, and then talk a little bit about how it fits in with the work we've done in the past.
he already
Right.
gave a presentation to the trustees.
Yeah. And then I think he'll come when he has more findings. Though I think he will have done enough work by that point that he'll be able to talk a little bit about what he's finding out.
So he is hired to do a study.
Right. So the first step is the study to look at, to update some of the numbers, such as the demand, for example, and then to look at some of the locations where IA systems might be located. And I know there are some people who have contacted the village about this that I think he's going to start working with, and get some sense of what this would mean from an economic point of view.
People.
Right.
Who?
Owners.
And he did
Right.
indicate that there is a possibility to switch dry use to wet use as well. So
Right,
there is more
Right.
ability there.
That's
Right.
interesting.
Just clarification, though.
And
I mean, we're going to first, even with the study, we're going to create a
So one of the things I think that has come up, thank you for bringing it up, and it's very important, is that I think there's been a little bit of confusion on everyone's part that under any circumstance we still need to create a sewer
Right.
district.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Right,
very
and
good.
that's a
I was
very,
gonna go
very,
there.
and I think I watched the video of the trustee meeting. I wasn't there, but I think there was a little bit of confusion about that. That doing the IA doesn't eliminate the need to
Right.
create a sewer district because
Right, because
I-
he was talking about individual
Right,
lots, and it
right.
got a little confusing there. Yeah.
Right, and I think the county, which ultimately is going to have a good deal of control over this,
I was just going to ask.
is going to say, where's your sewer district? Like, it's
Right.
all great, but where's your
Okay.
sewer
If my
district?
memory serves me correctly,
Right.
I believe that he said that the village has to create a district
Right.
for every.
He did say it, yes,
for-
yes.
So we do have to create districts for every
No. It's one district, and then,
Okay,
I watched the video.
sub-district, or?
Yeah,
sorry.
but he
One
pointed out to people, but I don't think they caught it, that you still have to create a district.
Yes.
You can do sub-districts within it, but you first have to create an overall district.
But our original plan
Right.
was for the village business district.
Right, and he used the
It's
map.
going to be probably about the same thing.
Probably.
Yeah, he used the map, so it's the same, it's
Same thing, different
It's
technology.
basically the same area.
Area.
You know, it's Hill Street, sort of up to First Neck, more or less. It's North Sea Road up to Bowdoin Square, Hampton Road up to Town Hall.
And including town hall.
No, that was not in the original district.
And what about the hospital then?
And not the
That's,
hospital in the original district.
I'll tell you what I didn't really like about the president. I mean, I like Pure Lombardo.
Right,
I-
right.
That's what
Right, I know.
I
know.
voted for.
Yep.
And originally, and I
Right.
liked it because he was taking the existing septic tanks
Right,
and then
right.
using those and
Right.
creating the clusters. But in his presentation, he was talking about that it would not be, that is within the sewer district, not every business would be required to
Right,
do
I
it,
agree with you.
So
which
it's
is strange.
voluntary.
Yes.
It's
Only,
Voluntary?
only who wanted it.
Yeah,
And the cost was borne by the,
right. So the
so
other,
it's very different from the
I-
original concept that everybody should,
Right.
and we would bear the cost,
Right,
and then we
right.
would spread it out.
I agree with you. I think the other thing that I was a little bit concerned about was I think people were left with the idea that this could all be voluntary.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But
crazy.
you can do a voluntary first phase, and I think it's a great idea to do a voluntary
Right,
first
just
phase
to
to get
test
things
it.
going.
Yeah.
But eventually, I think you have to require people to,
I give a time period, and
Right,
at a certain
right.
point, everybody has to
Well,
be part of it.
as far as Suffolk County goes then, if you create a district and then you have only voluntary cells,
right, they won't
how
allow
is
that.
that billed?
Yeah,
Right, I don't
that
think
doesn't
they'll
make
allow
sense.
that.
No, you
Well,
don't think
no, I think the idea, so I think there's two concepts here which can fit together. One is the mayor's desire to show some immediate progress on this issue
Of course.
and get people starting to clean up. And that's sort of what P.O. is talking about. You need to do that, though, in the context of a sewer district and the context of a longer-term plan that says over a period of time, everyone's going to end up complying, whether it's 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is. I think the county will ultimately want to see that everybody is complying because you can't do 50% of the problem, you have to do 100%.
Well, if you have a
Plus it won't-
district, you have a district.
Right.
Plus, it won't resolve our issues.
Right, we will
about-
resolve the issue. Getting 5 people to comply is better, but it doesn't solve it.
But I think we have to reach out to the we have to reach out to them first and
Yep,
and see
yep.
if they're fond of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of them will do it,
Yeah.
just given the current economics. I mean, the world has changed. It's harder to get retailers than it was. So,
So wet use is.
right.
And a lot of
Yeah.
these landlords, as we know, a lot of them are, absentee, they're not here.
Right,
So I
right.
think maybe given the option and given their checkbook, whatever, they would be more inclined to
Right, hopefully
to
that's the
invest.
case. Right,
Yes.
right.
Hopefully.
I don't know if everyone saw it. Very interestingly, there was an article. It's on 27 East. I don't know if it's in the printed
West
newspaper
Hampton
today. East Hampton.
East Hampton, oh.
East Hampton, very interesting article about how they had a meeting about their concerns about their business district and increasing vacancies. Concerned about the inability to put in more wet uses. Talking about potentially creating a sewer district.
There you go.
Addressing parking issues. We could have written the article. So it's not just us who have these issues.
Yeah.
We're all very much
Well,
in the
West
same
Hampton
boat.
Beach is,
doing it.
pretty far
Yeah,
along, and
yeah.
they've just requested $4 million from CPO.
Yep.
I think that's for the conveyor.
Yeah. So, so the other issue I wanted to bring up in that context is I think everyone was around for it. So when the sewer district was being considered, they had identified a potential site for a treatment plant,
Right,
which was next to the police station,
right, which is no longer
Which is
there.
where the.
which is no longer available.
Ambulance barn
Right,
there now.
which is no longer available. However, the former chair of the Planning Commission, C.C. Maximi, had brought to our attention then that the other site in the North Sea Road
Yeah.
area was the site that Bo Robinson owned, that if you remember,
Which is
they
an
asked
empty lot.
for a zoning change. It's an empty lot. And I
Bo
think,
would be thrilled.
right, but putting that aside, the town apparently has renewed interest in that. And I think it would be a major step forward for the village to encourage the town to acquire it, because for any treatment that we do, it's definitely the right
You don't need a
site.
treatment plant anymore. With appeals, you don't have a treatment plant.
I don't, right, but I don't think that long-term,
Yeah,
that's going to answer everything. I think it will answer some things, but in the long term, we're going to need a more robust system, I think.
so that would go up the hill there?
Right. I mean, it's a fairly good-sized site. It's
Oh, I
right.
know.
It's where it would need to be. I mean, we've always thought about North Sea because that is the drainage shed,
Right.
Yeah,
so it's the right place for it.
yeah.
I
So
believe there's pipes onto the property.
yeah, that also
Yeah.
need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Right.
Does he go into that lot up on South Street, that part of the village?
No,
No.
It's not contiguous.
It's contiguous, but not.
I thought we were talking about the lot near the 7-Eleven. We're talking about a different.
No.
Yeah. Well, it's
No,
sort
no,
of
the lot next to the post office.
It's next to the post office.
post office.
Yeah, it's next to the
tick
post
lot.
office. Yeah, yeah.
The tick lot,
Oh, I see.
The what lot?
the tick lot.
The tick lot.
Okay.
You don't have one there.
So, I think it would be very helpful if the town does buy that, because I think it's ultimately going to be a very good resource
The town
for us.
buys it.
Well, because it's through
CPF.
CPF.
Ah, they're gonna use that money to buy it.
Well, we had, so ironically, we had twice, both when Mark Epley was mayor and when Michael Irving was mayor, it had been on our list.
Yeah,
And the town, CPF, I guess, in its, slow and deliberate manner, has finally got to that point on the list. And I think, is looking to see if that's still a site that we're interested in being
what's
acquired.
Bo's price tag?
I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know.
All I know is when Bo was presented an offer, I believe both parties were not inclined to.
Right. And again, I believe now there is more inclination to do it.
On both
Since they didn't
sides.
change the zoning.
Right. Exactly. So.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very important long-term resource for the village
Yeah.
for this issue. So I'd like to see if I can have support to write a letter to the trustees urging them to say yes,
Which trustees?
the village trustees.
So they're gonna request the CPF from
They
the
have
town.
to tell, yes, they have to, I think, make a formal request.
I think it's
That's a
good
business,
idea.
that's a business district, that's zone business, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I think any
Is this
any
business, I
empty
guess,
lots that we can
Right.
require and hold is a good
Right,
idea.
right. So,
Just a
Yeah.
question, does Mr. Lombardi, does he know about this lot? Has he looked at
No,
it?
because his system doesn't really require this
No,
right now.
I understand, but he's not just narrowed on that.
no. That's not his,
He could probably foresee
yes. Yeah, I think he'll talk
if
about,
that would be
right,
a good site.
right.
So, I'm just wondering if we should,
Well, it's clearly a good
But it-
site. I don't think there's any
But it
question.
would
You don't
be
think
for-
that he would-
It would be for a completely different system, though.
Right.
no, I understand that, but planning,
But
it's
I
not
don't-
just
but-
now,
but I don't
planning is,
I don't
think
think he'd
you
be
can-
involved right now.
Use CPF property to build a plant, if that's what you're saying, Laura.
No, you can.
You can use
Yeah.
CPF property to build the.
Right, because of the amendment they made last year for clean
for
water.
clean water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as long as it's
Or some
in the,
affordable housing.
as long as it's in the, as long as it's acceptable to that kind of use. I mean,
Right,
that's
right.
all I'm saying.
Right,
Or affordable housing.
That's another can of worms.
Well, CPF isn't going to do that, are they?
Not yet, not yet,
Not yet.
not yet. Hopefully it's up.
As long as the professionals say that this is,
Right.
that this, for what we're planning
Mhm.
now and later,
Right,
that this site would work. I mean, that's all. That's all I'm,
Well, I
We
think
don't have to give a required use for
No.
CPF.
No, we don't have, well, yes, you do if
No,
you
you
want the
don't.
money.
No, you don't.
No?
No,
Oh,
you
you
just-
just say we want to buy this piece of
So
property.
nobody else will develop it.
But it has to come under an auspices.
But if CPF is going to pay for it,
Right.
they have certain restrictions on the money that they allocate.
Correct.
No, I mean, the only restriction, I think, is that if nobody, you cannot develop it. Then
Right,
if it's going to be a development for the municipality, then, it's a different issue if it's for the
Right.
well-being of the,
right. It can't be used for a private use. It
Yeah.
can't be sold.
Parking lot?
You can't build nothing.
I think some have been actually
again, if
developed.
it's for the
Right.
benefit of the environment of the area, then
Right,
they
right.
I
probably
thought
will allow
CPF
it.
was more narrow in their requirements.
One of the main
It's
reasons why.
narrow in the sense
well,
that
one of the
they
reasons for
put the land aside so that
And
it
there are
cannot
lots of
be developed.
exceptions. There,
But
obviously,
then
they
I
use.
think you can request
Right.
if there's a benefit for the.
I would remind
community.
everyone that you end up using CPF money somehow for the Sag Harbor Cinema. So,
Well, that was under an historic auspices.
right,
yeah.
correct. So it is
Oh, Mary,
wider.
where are you now?
Right, exactly. So it is a little wider than it first appears. So can I get support to send a
Yeah.
letter to the trustees?
With the caveat.
I understand the caveat.
Okay.
Okay? I have a
With the
motion.
caveat that I can buy for $1 later.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right?
Motion?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. So, there was a meeting on November 16th, which was a training session for village officials with the State Historic Preservation Office. Eldon Scott organized and arranged the meeting. Eldon actually can't make it tonight, so I said I would report for him. I think, and I know there's some people in the audience who were at the meeting, it was a good meeting, a lively meeting, and a good sort of good grounding in, I think a term that we've talked a little bit about at this commission, which is best practices, which is the concept that there are practices being used by governments across the state under the auspices of the State Historic Preservation Office, which should be a model for the village. In summary, we actually, the ARB follows standards and regulations created under the Historic Preservation Act. As I think most of you know, that is administered in New York State by what some of us call the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, based in Albany under what's called a Certified Local Government Program. And we are a certified local government. And the primary tool that they use is what's called the model law, which is, it turns out, what was used by the ARB when our code was created. However, well, let me actually get there in a minute. And in addition to that, the SHPO also provides technical assistance and grants for historic district surveys, design guidelines, training, etc. And actually, the village has been, with Jen Messiano, has been studying those grants and grants we could potentially apply for. There's, and I also should note, SHPO audits the village at least every 4 years to make sure that we're in compliance with state and federal requirements, and that the ARB also on village code, we also sort of have an ARB, as do many towns, that does two things. It also has a general design review mandate and can does it make design recommendations for properties that are not in the historic district, as we all know. So whether it's gates or additions to houses or whatever, those are throughout the village. So Linda McKay, who came here from the State Historic Preservation Office, made a number of recommendations that are worth discussing. Number one, and probably the simplest first step, is to update our model law to the latest 2014 version. So the 2014 version reflects improvements and clarifications modifications to the design guidelines, design standards, which would comply with state and federal standards, and would be a more transparent and swifter review process. So the village attorney was there, and I think that's something that I think, you know, people were at the meeting, and I would ask members of the audience to talk afterwards, you know, thought was a really good idea as a place to start.
Alice or David, or which?
Alex.
Okay.
Yeah. A really good place to start in terms of just updating our code to meet the current code. Our code is pretty dated. Second, and that's something. Second is interesting, an item we've talked about, and I think we actually wrote to the trustees about a few years ago, which is updating the building department application form for a basic explanation of the ARB process and design standards. So, and you know, that's something we talked a lot about, that applicants know going in what they're required to do.
Don't they give this out to?
Not always.
Well,
I got
not
this.
really. I mean,
I got this.
Eldon got copies made, and that is upstairs now. But this would be part of the actual application. Is the idea.
I see.
So you would know it. Yeah.
As part of the workshop,
Sorry, Charlie's gonna yell at me. Can you? Yeah.
my name is Sarah Latham. I'm on the Architecture Review Board. As part of Ms. Mackey's presentation, she
Right.
pointed out that Roslyn has a particularly
Right.
good code in which they front load everything. So
Right.
so basically the applicant is highly aware of exactly
Right.
what is requested,
Right.
so that there are no disappointments.
Right.
And I think that perhaps the Roslyn code should
Yeah.
be introduced as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Very good. And I think the idea, Eduardo, is that people, one of the things that happens so often in our village is people sort of learn midway through the process. They don't realize that, you know, they think they're doing something very simple. Why would it go to the ARB? And in our village, it does go to the ARB. So,
What I've noticed, a lot of the
Right.
frustration comes from people, or builders, I should say, come in and they put forth an application. Presumably, they would have like a garage attached that was front facing, but we don't really have. We really try to discourage that, at least for
Right.
attached garages. So there is various aspects to the code which, if it was presented to them, they wouldn't waste time drafting plans for a house that wouldn't be approved.
yeah, so let me get to that, because it's a very good point, because I think that goes to the third point, which is, you know, and again, it's something that we've actually talked about, which is the idea, and I think Linda talked about it as being quote-unquote a village architect. The idea that there'd be someone on staff who would help the maybe be a staff person in the building department, or help the building department, so to help coordinate the review between the boards, do a thorough report for the boards, but also help the applicant. So there's so much that you could tell an applicant up front. To just, as you say, Joe, you know, look, if you're going to attach the garage, don't show front facing, because that's unlikely to get approved. Doesn't mean they may decide to do front facing anyway, but at least you're giving them enough information. Why waste their money and time? And I think most people would really like that. So I think we have actually talked about this in the past. It's something I think we've recommended several times. With the idea that there be a staff person, and you know, it's up to the trustees where that staff person is, but the idea that there be a person who would basically manage this process, and would also coordinate between the boards. Because the other thing that is, and again, we're not the only village with this issue. You might come in to do a house, and you have to go to the zoning board of appeals, and you have to go to the ARB, or you have to go to the planning board and the ARB, and the two boards almost act as
Separate.
silos, each looking at their own issue, where, you know, the way most villages would approach it is they work together to solve issues.
I've seen that mostly with the ZBA and ARB, because if an applicant gets a ZBA approval, then they tend to say, well, the ZBA gave me that, why can't the ARB approve my plan?
Right.
Because the ZBA approved my
Right,
variance.
right,
So-
right.
Under the present system, what are the major divergences between what the applicants are presenting and what the ARB requires? I mean, what are the major issues usually? Or, I mean, are most of them passed without a problem, or they all have a problem because of the present?
No, I would
System
say, I
depends.
mean, it's hard to say a number, but I would say most go through the process. Maybe it gets a little cumbersome, but they go through.
I-
But
I
right.
would say the biggest issue, maybe Sarah can comment, but
Right.
I think when you have a house prior to our historic date outside the district, that's really a biggest issue for them. I also think that if, having gone to some of the meetings, that you do have an issue with again, but I think the biggest issue is having the historic house outside the district. And mostly, those issues you're referring to, Eduardo, are mostly situations in which you have houses within the district or just outside the district.
The reason I'm asking the question, because we're looking at changing or
Right.
improving the system. I'm just wondering, how broken is the system? That's why I'm asking.
Well, I would
the
say there
question.
are two or three things that happened, which is one which has got better, I think, but still is a problem, is people get fairly far in the system with errors or things that are not clear. So something that should be 10 feet is 12 feet, or something is shown to be 10 feet and it's really not, or it's so there's a number of applications get too far down the system, and the boards are finding something when they do their thorough review. That shouldn't,
Or
that's avoidable, right? If you had a staff person, you could do that type of review before it gets to the board. That's number one. Number two, I would say, and again, it's I think one of the reasons that this has been proposed, and it's Joe's point in a way. Going up front, there are certain things that in this village the boards prefer to see, right? Decisions made over long periods of time, what the neighbors want, and all that. People get fairly far in the process, particularly here where people might hire, forgive me for saying this, some fancy architect from New York who has not done this here before, and then they get halfway through they get all the way through, and they're suddenly finding people really don't like it, and they're saying, well, that's not the sort of thing we approve. Nakamoto is sort of an example of that. It got fairly far along, and that person spent a lot of money, and probably, this sort of staff person could have said to them, I think it's going to be really hard to get that approved. The person can still decide to try, but at least they would have known up front that this was a design that was going to have trouble. And most people, when you hear that, I mean, I sit on the other side very often, making applications. Very painful for me or for my clients when you're through the process and suddenly they say, why would you submit that? We would never approve something like that. And you feel like an idiot,
So
right?
this architect would review the plans before they go to the ARB?
Correct.
And
That's the whole idea.
Well,
Be
also,
handed preservation briefs.
Right.
So the architect would know the national standard.
Right,
Also-
right.
And the architects that work in the village, they're not already aware of all these? I mean, they should be, because they've done it more than once.
Yes, but there are false expectations.
I have a question. Okay, so there are designated architectural districts.
Right.
And there are designated architectural houses. Right?
Individual.
Some.
Individual houses, yeah.
Individual.
Right.
So the purpose is to evaluate whether any house is architecturally.
Well, so as I said, the ARB does two things in the village. It regulates the historic district.
Okay, I get that.
But most houses, for one reason or another, end up before the ARB. I mean, look at the ARB agenda. It says it says structures within the historic district, structures outside the
So
historic
is this
district.
process, okay, so is this process going to find out if this house is architecturally significant or not?
No, that's...
Well, yes. Let me add that. So the other thing that I think is pretty unique. I always hate to say unique, but not typical, is usually someone who has specific historic expertise for the village plays the first role of, looking at this house and say, look, this is likely to be something that needs review. In our village, the building inspector does that.
But that was for the demolitions.
Well, yeah, but no, it's actually sort of it's up to the building inspector to flag this is a house of some importance. That's
even
not,
even if it's not listed.
well, the number of listed houses is tiny.
No. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, even if it's not listed.
Right, correct.
Two things. The building inspector does have the authority to give it to the ARB to review it,
Right,
which hasn't always been done in the past.
right.
The other thing is, I find that the ARB has an issue with people who, and maybe this helps, maybe it doesn't, but people tend to, as you said, Paul, they tend to change their mind halfway through and don't go back for the review process.
Right,
And
right.
they go from the ARB to have an application, but the work has already been done, which puts the village and the board in a precarious situation.
Well, I mean, doing these changes won't help that. If somebody wants to
Right, and you
be
can't.
dishonest, they're going to be dishonest.
Right, and that's not. But I
What are you
think
gonna do, demolish the house?
99%. I believe 99% of the people are not dishonest.
No,
That's not really the issue.
I
I think
agree
there's
on
just
that.
no. The guidance up front should ultimately and I think it puts the building inspector in a very difficult spot. It just doesn't make any sense. It should be someone with historic training who looks at it and says, look, I think this may be of some concern.
What is throwing me off is this historic training part. That is, somebody wants to build a house.
Right.
Yeah.
What does historic training have to do?
Well, so let me use a good example. So you have let me actually use an example that happened. So there were a number of houses built, rebuilt, or built or expanded on, I can't think of the name, Hunting Street.
No, I don't know that one.
At the very end of the process, I mean literally the night of the vote, Zach Studenroth says, I think we have a problem. I think these houses are potentially really important as an example of the plain style of building at the time. I saw the video. I'll never forget it. And I thought, how terrible for the village that we're realizing at the last minute, but how terrible for the applicant, who literally I thought was going to burst into tears. Like, this person had been all the way through the process, been through all the review. The night of the vote, someone says, I think this, and it gets delayed, right? And it's sort of chaos. That's a result of a process that has no early check. Because I think if there had been a person with historic training, they would have said day one, look, I'm just telling you this may be of interest, and you should know that, because if you know it's of interest, there are a lot of things you could do to create an application which would have a better chance of getting approved.
Well,
So why drive the applicant through the
it would
process?
be-
Well, I'm curious, what was the result?
The result was it ultimately got approved, but it
That's what I
was
figured.
but it was a mess.
Well,
It
but
was
the
a real
thing is,
mess.
Yeah, but
there
it was
should
a
be an
mess because
inventory.
Zacharod brought it up.
Right.
Well, there should be an inventory then.
Right.
May I say, just
Yeah.
add something? So I'm on the
Your
town,
name.
Victoria Khan,
Right.
village resident,
Right.
and I'm a member of the town Landmarks and Historic Board. So the procedure there, I think, is similar or identical to what you have in the
Right.
village. And the first step does vest with the building department.
Right.
So in the town, which only has a few districts, historic districts, every property that comes before the building department for renovation, demolition, new application to build, okay, is supposed to be flagged by the building department as saying, gee, for the age of the property, okay, number one. Looks kind of old, maybe historic, we don't know, but we're going to send it to Landmarks and Historic, okay? Before we do anything, it's flagged and it comes to our board. And we have to go through it and see if there's anything about the building character that might meet the same, regulations that Linda talked to you about on the 16th or 17th.
Right.
And that's what we do is we look at it. And we may or may not agree. It may have historic value, it may not.
Right.
And then once we've opined, then
Right.
it goes back to the building department, and it follows the rest of the procedures, so that it should never get to the end of the process,
Correct.
okay, with the applicant having spent time and money and anticipation,
Right.
and then get totally, heartbroken that this is historic and we have to do something.
I like that better though, a
Right.
group instead
I
of an
like that.
architect.
I like that a
Because
lot.
an
Right.
architect is one individual, and
Right.
he may have biases, he
Right.
may have, I
Right.
don't know what. if you have a group of people that
Right.
they can discuss and they can come to a consensus,
Right.
that makes more sense.
I just have an addendum. Part of the problem is that there was an additional survey done in 15 years ago
Right,
2017.
that updated
right,
because the years march on, and now we have things that are 50 years old that weren't 50 years old in the 70s when the blue forms are done. And so there's a catch-up that needs to be done. Now, we've got an inventory that was paid for by the state, but nothing has happened
Right.
with this inventory, making this part of a larger register. And so that needs to be done immediately. Now, in the meantime, some of the things that might be demolished could be caught with this buffalo form. But other than that, there's really, no mechanism to protect things.
This landmark committee sounds like a mechanism.
And what Vicky has would probably
right.
do what
Vicky Khan again. One more thing, I don't want to take up this whole meeting here, but you do have a lot more ability
Right,
and enforcement than the town does because you are a CLG.
right,
So the CLG designation status
Right.
not only gives you the ability to apply for grants, but it also gives you the ability, should you so choose, to actually designate
right,
a property
right,
as historic value.
Right,
Right.
right.
Now, whether you want to do that, I had asked Alexandra to sort of get back to me, because this was fascinating. Can you actually, have you ever exercised that right
Right, right.
as a village without the owner's consent? And she does not believe so.
Right.
Although technically, you do have the right.
Yeah,
You
technically,
have
yeah.
owner's consent, but we do not.
Please go to the microphone when
Right.
you're going to speak.
That's probably right.
Excuse me. It is my understanding that the town requires owner's consent,
Right.
whereas the village does not require owner's
Right,
consent. Now,
right.
that doesn't mean that it will always be applied
Right.
if it's dicey.
Right.
But to my understanding, when I was a historic preservation consultant, we don't have to worry about owner's consent,
Right,
whereas the
right.
town chooses to.
Right, right. I think the first step to me is that the applicant and their professionals know going in what they're dealing with, so that, because I think most people will try to figure out a way to do something that's going to get approved. I mean, that's what most people,
Well, if it's
there are going to
flagged,
be
it's
people
flagged.
who, for whatever reason, because they have more money than God, or because they are convinced they're right, or whatever, they're going to do what they want to do. No process is going to change that, but I think most people, at the end of the day, if they're told, this is how this is likely to be something that the boards can approve, that's what, they'll try to figure out a way to do that. And one of the things that I think is most distressing about our process now is that's happening at the end, after people spend an enormous amount of time and money. And that's not good. I don't think it's good for anybody. It's not good for the applicant, it's not good for the village. And then the village boards, and I think, again, having been on the other side, if I'm an applicant and I'm getting caught at the end, what do I say? Oh my God, woe is me. I mean, I can't, you've destroyed my
There's no
life.
forgiveness.
I'm going to lose my career, and so the boards get under enormous pressure to approve because it is so late in the process.
And to come full circle, I think
Right.
what Monto
But if it's
was-
flagged, if a property is flagged, it's flagged. They would know that writing the thing, no?
Right, but so what does that mean? I think it's not just that it's flagged, it's like, in other words, if I'm an applicant, I see that it's flagged, what does that mean?
So you titled the flag.
No. When I say what does that mean in terms of what I need to
The
do
process.
to get through this
So
process?
then somebody knowledgeable should tell you that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm still trying to
Right.
understand
Right.
where this will be of most significance. I mean, if you have an empty lot,
Right, it's not,
you're just
right.
building a house.
Correct, that's not
So that
really,
goes straight
yeah.
to the ARB.
Right,
If
Right.
you have a house that you want to demolish, then we already talked about somebody going there and checking to see if the house has historic value or not.
right.
Taking out the
before.
mantles.
So, and if they say, they mix it, no, okay, it gets
Right.
demolished, and then it's like
Right
an
now,
empty lot,
right
and you're
now,
building
right
a
now,
house.
again, that falls under the building inspector,
Right,
which, I think the idea would be, let's move that, at least for advice to that person,
Mhm.
somebody who can,
I understand, but that's
Right.
part of that process.
Right,
The
right.
demolition issue.
right.
So
This is really,
once that's been
Right.
resolved,
right.
why do you need an
Okay,
architect?
so let me
to go
use an
through everything
example. I
else?
have a house that's built in 1910, right? And my guess is, because I did the same thing to the person who lived next door to me, if I want to do something to my house, all my neighbors are going to be very concerned. They're going to go to the ARB. The ARB is going to be concerned because the street has a certain character, the house has a certain character.
Where do you live?
On the hill.
Do you?
Yeah.
It's probably historic up there.
Yeah. So this would be early warning, Paul, if you want to do that 2,000 square foot modern architecture extension on the side, that's likely to be something that's going to get a hard time going through, but these are things that are getting more likely to get approved. That's helpful to everyone in the process, because it clutters the ARB with something that caught, and it saves me money and time. That's, I think, where, and we have
So you're looking for an advisory type.
Right, you can never force an applicant, right? I mean, the applicant will ultimately do what the applicant wants to do, but I think most applicants will say, thank you very much, now I know, right? And they'll try to do something that fits, right? And that's now happening all the way at the end, literally.
Well, it's happening at the beginning at the ARB. You have to present the plans.
But
to
the ARB, you're already in the process, right? You've already done your building application, you've already maybe gone to the ZBA, you've done a whole bunch of things.
Would you have to do that before you go to this consultant anyway?
No,
You go to them first.
you go to them first. When Joe Schmo, my architect, walks in, the building department hands them a form and says, okay, you need to go to this board, or you need to sit down with our staff person, and we need to review this with you.
They already did the plan, so I mean.
Well, no, at that point, they wouldn't really have done they may have done very preliminary set of plans, but this is early, the first time you go to the building department, this is the first thing they would say. Okay, take my house as an example.
So before
1910, you better go and talk to people before you do
the building
anything.
department would sign off and give a permit,
Correct.
this person would have to review it,
Right,
but this person.
or the board or
But
whatever,
this
right.
person cannot nix it.
Right, it's not a matter of nixing, it's a matter of them giving counsel, basically, saying, okay, your house is 1910, it's pretty much preserved as it was, and, the board's going to be very concerned about doing something that is compatible with that, and, you're close to your neighbors, and, so-and-so, and they're going to flag for the building inspector that this is going to have to go to the ARB and is of importance, right? So the building inspector knows. So it's really a process that allows everyone early on, number one, for me as the applicant to get, by the way, I'm not planning on doing anything to my house, me as the applicant to get some guidance, and secondly, the boards to know up front, and have a reasonable chance that whatever they get is not going to be something that they then are faced with something where they're having the person come back 4 times.
Yeah, Vicky Kahn again. Yeah, the town, like the village, does not have any enforcement,
Right.
unfortunately. But as Paul correctly stated, it's to give advice. So there may be someone in the building department, they see the application, they see there's an application for demolition, and they said, gee, I know that family, that house has been around for a very long time, and they know it may have, maybe the architecture may not in and of itself be historically, worthy of preservation, but the fact that the family contributed so much to the town and the character and the landscape that it needs to go in front of the board. So it's purely advisory.
I mean, you can go endlessly on, which I don't want it tonight, obviously, the Pierce Connor house, right? Clearly an example where if the process is working the way I said, the first time the applicant came in, they would have been told, look, you're going to have a real issue here. Like, I want you to know right now. And so one of the things the applicant finally said to the ZBA and the ARB is, I have a hardship because no one told me, right? I didn't know. No one told me. I spent all this money on this plan. Village ended up with a CPF, whatever. Ended up spending a lot of money to buy the site.
Buying the property to start with.
Right, but
You don't know at that point.
Right, but so it's just, that, you could come up with innumerable examples in the village of people getting caught very late in the process, and that's, I think, not a good thing for anybody.
And they can open us up to a lawsuit if they choose.
Right, right. And then it also, that encourages litigation because people say they're not being
You
treated
think
fairly.
The best solution or the best proposal would be just an architect or a board like Vicky has?
I think that's not my choice. And I mean that seriously. I think those are all good ideas.
That's up to the trustees.
Yeah, it's up to the trustees. But I think part of this is to get to the next step. The other thing I should mention, which someone noted, is they also encouraged us to apply for a grant from the SHPO to update both our historic district and design guidelines. So they give those grants.
Right.
And so Linda thought it would be a very good idea for us to apply, and we would
A
certainly.
lot of money though, I heard.
No, but these things don't cost a lot of money.
Right.
This is really just for the study. It's not for.
Right.
Yeah. So, and again, I mean, one of the reasons, and I think we all owe Eldon a world of thanks because sort of the way the process
That was
works is
interesting,
once the SHPO gets involved, you're more likely to get the grants. So.
Right.
So,
Okay, interesting.
yeah, interesting,
You
right?
scared Laura away.
Yes, I know. Well, she had to go pick up somebody for the party. So yeah, so
Okay.
yeah. So any other items? And I will make copies. I should say, sorry, I will make copies of this form that Sarah gave us, which is the what Buffalo uses, which is an interesting. I like this. It's very simple. It's not complicated. Very easy to fill out. And I think also I will send around. They put together a slideshow for the meeting that I'll get around to everyone on the committee. That's actually quite interesting, and talks about some of the other villages. Roslyn, North Hempstead, Great Neck, Plaza, Greenport, Sag Harbor, East Hampton. So, the model law, and the certified local government, which we are. So, anything else?
No.
Okay. Thank you. This is the conclusion of the December meeting. And I should note, in January, we do not meet the week of holiday. We're not mean enough for that. So we will figure out another date. I've asked PO to give us some possible dates, and then I'll see what works for everybody.
Okay.